All right, here is the new release for June of 2022. We've got some awesome new stamping foam. It is the circle cut stamping foam. It comes in a pack of 2. It's got 4 pieces inside of here. And if you guys are familiar with the other stamping foams that we've done, we have the normal size stamping foam. This is kind of what I would refer to as the regulation, the normal. It is kind of the stamping foam that's going to give you a little bit of a border on the outside, right? This is the first one we came up with. I love the little white border that it adds to the A2 size card. And then we started coming out with larger stamping foams. So of course we had the larger size that looks just like this with no cutouts. So if you want to stamp the whole card base and have the whole thing covered, there's that one. There also is a heart cut stamping foam, which has this heart shape on the inside. And of course you can use the outer frame and also the inner piece for the heart. And all these are on Ranger's website as well. So if you've missed any of them or you want to check them out, be sure to stop by there. But now we have the circle cut stamping foam. And this is so incredibly exciting. So with the circle cut, again, you get this nice large circle here, and then also you get this frame along with it. I didn't just want to give you guys shapes and have these kind of be thrown away. I think this part is so cool because what you can do is stamp an outer frame, have the inside be white, and put any sort of image on the inside here. I've been doing this a lot with die cutting for my whole crafting career, and I use the shapes circles and hearts probably the most often. And so I really wanted this idea to kind of come to life in stamping foam. And so bringing you guys the circle is one of my favorites. I'm so excited to see everything you guys do with this, and I can't wait to share the projects I created after I go through all the products here. So the circle cut stamping foam is so exciting to add to the collection. All right, now to go kind of along with the larger stamping foams, we are releasing a larger acrylic block. And if you guys know my acrylic blocks, they come in a pack of 2. I'm gonna bring them in here. These ones are a little messy because I've been using and loving them, but my regular acrylic block set comes in a pack of 2 like this. It's got 1 large acrylic block that's great for stamping pretty much any image. I actually made it just a tiny bit larger than the average acrylic block so that it can fit more images, since the images from my sets are a little bit larger. And then we also included this acrylic block that's great for sentiments and things like that. I think this one has a whole new life of its own, and if you've got kind of a small stamp on the center, I really appreciate, instead of having just a tiny little acrylic block, to have something larger like this rectangle so that you've got kind of more of a grip on it. Like this, I don't know why, but it's been a little bit more comfortable. So I've been loving these, and I know many of you guys have fallen in love with these acrylic blocks like I have, because they're the perfect thickness, that they're not too thick, because sometimes if something's too thick, I find I can't get the pressure enough all on the image there. And then sometimes there's acrylic blocks that are too thin, and I feel like I'm gonna drop them. So this has been the perfect size for me, and a lot of you guys have made comments on it, how much you love it. And once the stamping foam released, the acrylic box kind of took on a life of its own, because I always pretty much attach this to the acrylic block because it gives you a much more even pressure, so that when you press down, you're pressing on a hard surface, so that instead of it being kind of squishy and getting here and there, it gets across the whole stamping foam, right? And so when the large stamping foams came out, I know that some people were having a couple issues with pressure, right? Because the edges might have been a little bit more difficult to get than the center. So in comes the new 5x6 acrylic block, which I'm probably just gonna call the large acrylic block. I am so incredibly excited about this because it has lots of purposes that I have been using it for. Now, I want to preface this by saying this acrylic block is the tiniest bit thinner. We're talking, I think, about 2 millimeters thinner. And we did this because I tested out the acrylic block with the same thickness as these smaller ones, and it just got a little bit too heavy. And I'm always about making it so that it works for you guys and so that it's not going to follow your hands. I tested it for a little while and I was like, you know what? This one needs to be just the tiniest bit thinner. Not too thin where it's gonna fall out of your hands, right? You still got an amazing grip on this one that I think is just perfect. Again, not too thick, not too thin. And it's got the same lines on here. So with that being said, it's got centering lines. So we've included these lines that are bolded right in the center. So that's how you know where it's going to be lined up. And then the other lines are every ½ inch. So you've got littler lines every ½ inch, which really help to line things up and ensure that things are going to be nice and straight. Now, the reason why I love this acrylic block so much is because it's going to fit all of the large stamping foams, so you can tape them on and use this as a handle for the stamping foam, which I'll share later in the video. But yeah, it's amazing. Marcy in the comments is just talking about how she went to use the foam and had a hard time getting a good impression. So this hopefully will help you a lot with that. And I'll give you some good tips for getting a great impression with the large foams later on. But also, where this really comes in handy is, let's say you have one of the 6x6 stamps. Now, this isn't going to fit a 6x6 stamp, right? I find that, that acrylic block would have been way too large for your span of your hands, that you just really couldn't do that. As you guys know, I love to stamp my 6x6 stamps facing upwards like this. I ink them up and then I put my paper into them. And I find that I get the best impression that way. But, as you guys know, many of my stamps are peel apart. And what am I going to do with an image like this? Because I can't put it on here like this. And if I stamp it like this, I won't really be able to see the lineup as I stamp it down my card. So that's where this acrylic block really comes in handy. We've sized it perfectly to fit all of these 6x6 stamps, so that when you've got a smaller piece of your 6x6 stamp, it's going to work perfectly. So this has been an amazing addition to my new line. Even for just this use right here, it is the perfect acrylic block. But also, not to mention, if an image from your stamp set is too big for this block, move on over to this block and you're gonna get a great impression. So that is why I love this acrylic block. I have been using this one for months on end. I honestly can't even imagine my crafting without it. I've been getting a lot of comments. So if you've been seeing this acrylic block in lots of videos, this is this acrylic block just with no lines. This was my sample. So anytime I got a question of like, where did you get that large acrylic block? It was really just a prototype for this. And I was so excited to share it with you guys. I had to keep it a nice secret until today. But like I said, I think this one is going to give you guys tons of use. And I really can't imagine it in my craft room or crafting without it now. All right, so let me put this one back. I love this stippled circle stamp. You can also find it on my product page. It's been one of my favorites that I've designed. But we'll be using this acrylic block all throughout today's live. And honestly, guys, once again, I've bought and opened a ton of these already. If you guys know me, you know with my acrylic blocks, I've got kind of an obsession. I use a lot of them, and I used to have tons of different sizes of acrylic blocks, but to be honest, the two smaller ones have really taken over my collection. I love having them kind of uniform like that, and then same thing with this. Like I'll have one of these attached to the stamping foam, and then I can kind of use the other one for stamping backgrounds and stuff like that, but these have been amazing. All right, I talked a long time about just the acrylic blocks, but now moving into the ink pads. I could not be more excited about this. I've gotten so many questions to release more neutrals from my line because currently, before this, we only had Gurr and Woof, which these were named after my two dogs. One of them growls a lot, so I named it Gurr, and then one of them barks a lot, so I named it Woof. And they're pretty much these colors as well. I've probably posted my dogs on social media, so you guys have probably seen a lot of them. But with these two colors, and I'm going to show swatches in just a second, these two colors are great. They've kind of worked well throughout the past couple of years. They've been great additions, but we've had my product line for 4 years now, and I haven't added any new neutrals, even though I think that neutrals are some of the most versatile colors because there's so many things you could do with them, whether it comes to techniques, coloring, darkening colors. I'm going to show a lot of that during today's live, and there'll be a lot coming in future videos. But you guys have been begging for new neutrals because these are pretty much mid-tones, right? You can see on the label here, that's a good brown. It's kind of right in between a nice lighter brown and a darker brown. And this is a good gray too. It's pretty light. And so when it comes to these colors, if they're not super saturated, you can't really get a darker color than what this is, right? So that's where these new neutrals came into play. I wanted something for the brown a little bit lighter and something darker. And then I wanted something a lot darker for the gray so that I can get a whole spectrum of shades and really help kind of build up the gray colors if I was working with them. So these are the colors I'm so excited to share with you. This is cookie dough. I'm going to move these guys off to the side and grab you guys the swatches for each individual color. So excited to share them. So cookie dough is this really warm, neutral tan color. I love this color because previously with the browns, you couldn't get super light like this. This is going to be great for sand, anything like that. I really love kind of this warm, light brown. A lot of people were requesting it because in the past you had to take this brown and mix it with kind of a yellow color and really mute it down and water it down. And everyone was always asking, like, what's the color combination that you need to mix together to get this beautiful light tan? And so cookie dough was born out of that necessity, right? We only really bring out products if we need them. And I think we really needed this one. So it's this nice, neutral, warm toned tan. We went through a couple iterations to make sure that it wasn't too cool toned, wasn't too warm toned, and this one was perfect. It fit the bill perfectly. And honestly, this is where we need to chat in the comments, guys. Cookie dough was named because it's my favorite topping to put on ice cream. And I now want to know what your favorite topping is to put on ice cream. It's just so good. This is pretty much what I get every time. Yeah, everyone in the comments is saying they're sold. They totally needed a color like that. I agree. This one was so necessary in the collection. It was difficult to mix anything to get anything perfect like this. So that's why I absolutely loved this color. All right. Let's move on to the next tone. Some people are saying hot fudge. That's awesome. Crushed Oreos. Now that sounds good. I think cookie dough. Cookie dough's gotta be my favorite, guys. I love hearing all of your amazing favorite toppings, though. Okay, this next one is Weeping Willow. I'm just obsessed with it. Honestly, it's this rich and dark color. It almost looks like this melted dark chocolate bar. It is intense, bold, rich, and amazing of a brown color. You can totally mix this together with, like I said, the cookie dough, mix it with gur and get great blends. But you can also really darken things up with this color, which is amazing. It's this beautiful, warm, dark brown, and it's going to go well with a lot of your different cards. But like I said, you couldn't really take this color and get something like this by building it up. It's just too intense. But what I love about this color is you can then take this color and lighten it. So you can see up here, like, you can get a lighter brown with this color. You can get lighter blends with these dark colors. But what I really love about them is you can darken them up and get these amazing, amazing rich and saturated colors. So Weeping Willow is one of my favorites. We were really missing a dark brown like this, and I'm so excited to finally have it and share some of the amazing things you could do with it today. And then on all of these swatches, you guys know my inks are kind of water-based as well. They react with water nicely. So I have added a little bit of water on the side here to show you guys that you can really lighten it up and get that little bit of a lighter color with the water as well. So they're great for techniques. All right, lots of you guys are saying you love Weeping Willow. I love naming that one too. That one's such a fun name. And then last but not least, probably the most playful name from today is Shady. I thought this one was just perfect, but it really is what it says. It's this super dark, shady, neutral color. What I love about this is it's not too cool, it's not too warm, it doesn't lean really too much either way, but it almost is this black color. Like when you layer it up and you get this super intense color, it almost looks black, which is one thing I really wanted. I wanted a neutral that you could use, but it's not too solid. Sometimes black is a little bit too stark. So this color is going to be great for when you want something that's gonna give a nice contrast, but you don't want the blackest black that you have in your collection. One thing that's also awesome about this is, again, it's that super dark neutral color. Those dark neutrals are so necessary, and what's super cool about them is when you blend them upwards, you get a much lighter color. So I'm going to tilt this. Hopefully the lighting can show you guys. It gets a lot lighter at the top there. So that's one thing I love about it. And again, mix it along in with woof, and you'll get a nice color blend, right? So if you want a really light kind of mixture with that dark gray, then of course bring in this color and you'll get a beautiful blend. But Shady is just gorgeous. Look at it with those water splotches there. And I'm going to show lots of technique to use this gray color to mix with the other colors and create some beautiful blends and really get lots more use out of all your different colors. Everyone is saying Shady is such a great name and very aptly named. Thank you. It was a lot of fun. It was originally named something else. I forgot what it was, but I thought of Shady and I was like, that is just the perfect name. So I am obsessed with it. I'm glad you guys are loving it too. And yes, it is almost like this charcoal sort of color. Mel said it's sort of like a gray black. Yeah, and it's got kind of a charcoal look to it. It really does, and that's what I wanted when I was mixing this color together and getting this perfect blend. I think our chemist Steve really hit the nail on the head with all of these different colors that he created for this release. I think you guys are going to find that they are so versatile to create new color blends with and really get some amazing neutral looks with it. So that is the 3 new colors from today. I hope you guys really enjoy these. And I saw you guys say in the comments too, I think Taylor said it, that this one is going to be perfect for like beaches and the perfect summer beach blends, which I agree. It really is that perfect kind of sandy and neutral color. All right, guys, so one more thing with these new neutral tones, I want to share them mixed in with the other neutrals. So with Woof and Gur, I want to share kind of the swatches of those because I find that that's always so helpful to see exactly how they're going to fit in the line. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to kind of see just from the tags. Sometimes it's also a little bit difficult to see from the labels, right? From the labels, sometimes it's difficult to see on the screen, but hopefully this will give you the best look at the colors up close, kind of how they compare with each other. And yes, Ranger in the comments just said Steve is the best. He really is. He does such a great job at hitting the nail on the head with all of these colors, and if we want something a little bit different, he tweaks it. So he's been so amazing to work with when it comes to getting great formulations and getting these amazing and beautiful ink colors together. And honestly, Shady was a black at first, and I said, you know what? Let's just take that down a little bit. Let's not make it that dark, right? Let's add a little bit of gray into there. And so that's what he did. So this one wasn't actually like a color reference that he went off of. He just took kind of a black tone and lessened it a little bit. And that's how this color was born. There's not many ones like it. So it's super unique in that factor. All right, so here you can see how Cookie Dough and Weeping Willow fits in with Gur. I love these colors together. You can see that Cookie Dough's got that really nice warmth to it. So does Weeping Willow. Gur is a little bit interesting. When I first chose it, I love Gur for my line. It's this great in-between neutral color, and I think it's going to work great with both of these. But it's got a little bit more of a greenish tone to it, kind of an undertone there. It's not super noticeable, but when you kind of start watering it out, you'll kind of see the undertones of these colors. And so that's what you're going to kind of see a little bit there with Gur, especially when it's compared to these 2 browns. It really, really shows nicely. And then Woof is that first neutral. And like I was talking about, it is really this kind of warm tone gray, but it's the perfect mid-tone. It doesn't get super dark, and so that's where Shady comes into play. It's this perfect, like I said, almost black that Steve came up with. And it's going to work great with Woof because you can really darken it up if you want to, but also just a great blend on its own. An amazing neutral that if you don't want to use black, you can bring in this super dark and rich gray color, and it's going to add some amazing depth to your project. So there we go. Mel said that she has all the colors and of lots of different lines, and these are still so different. So thank you. Yes, we really do come up with different colors every time. We try to not make anything too similar. And like I was saying, hats off to the chemist at Ranger. That whole team and Steve is so amazing and do a great job at mixing these colors together, which I really appreciate. All right. Now, let's talk about samples. So we're going to jump into some of the project samples for all of these products, and then we will jump into crafting and showing some demonstrations. So with this release, I had lots of fun because there was no stamps and background stamps and stencils for this one, which I think is awesome. It really gives you a chance to focus more on the tools and bring out any of your products from past collections, right? Which is so much fun. So here I used the Sentimental Flowers stamp set. I love that one for these florals. And then I stamped down the inner circle of that stamping foam. I did that circle with the Paisley background stamp. I stamped it down with lots of bright colors. Then I wanted to bring a little bit of grunge factor into here. So for that, I went in with a little bit of Weeping Willow on the edge, and I just brought that in right on the edge with a little blending tool there. And I think it really kind of added some depth and dimension to it. And also, instead of stamping on black cardstock, I went in after heat embossing this and I just blended on a little bit more of Weeping Willow. And that's going to just kind of tie that together there and really bring it all together with the card. But I love kind of now bring in a little bit of brown. After you have such a bright card, you can kind of tone it back a little bit if you want to, make it a little bit more sophisticated, which I really love. All right, one thing that I have to say too is I've been teaching a lot of classes, and it's always funny to see what people need more of or what people want more of in person. And a lot of people wanted a lot of these neutrals. Like a lot of people were looking for grays and browns in my classes. So I'm so excited for this release because I think a lot of people have been wanting it, even if they haven't been asking purposefully, they've been asking subconsciously by trying to get those darker colors at my class. So this one uses the outside border of the new stamping foam, and I stamped it down with the Playful Petals background stamp. And again, that pinned comment has the link where you can shop all these products. So pretty much everything you guys see are going to be on that page of products there somewhere. Then I used the stamp. This one's also from the Sentimental Flowers stamp set. And then the Playful Petals, that's a tongue twister. The Playful Petals background stamp is a peel apart stamp. So I was able to peel it apart and add this down as a focal point there. I even added a little bit of lunar paste. And then you guys can see a little bit of that brown there. I also added some Weeping Willow onto the edge. Once again, to just bring a little bit of depth and dimension, adding some darkness to the edge kind of draws your eye to the center. And that's exactly what this does. So I really love how it looks. And then this technique was just done using those tiny detail blending tools and adding color down onto the card. All right, I'll get to any questions in just 1 second. I'm going to get through all of these different samples. There's only 2 more, and then I'll get into questions and then we'll craft. All right, so with this one, I was able to go in with the stamping foam, and I'm going to kind of share a card very similar to this one, if not the same today. This one, I used a placemat. So it's just literally a placemat. I bought it from Walmart. You could probably find it anywhere. And I cut it down and then I pressed it right into there. So I got that amazing texture on the stamping foam, which is so awesome. You can use any textures. It doesn't just have to be a stamp, which is what I think is so cool about it. I pressed it into there and then I was able to stamp this background stamp. Here I used a little bit of Weeping Willow and cookie dough for the background, which I think is super cool. It gives almost this more masculine look. And again, whenever I have guys in my class or a wife who's trying to make cards for their husband, it's always just kind of adding darker colors, which can be a good way to make masculine cards. Either way, though, I think that this is a great kind of background. It almost kind of gives a basket weave effect to that. So I love that kind of contrast, and then adding bright colors to the center really makes it pop. So I think even if you're trying to kind of get that more grungy effect or more masculine look, still bringing in kind of a pop of color somewhere is super important to me. So I love this one. And Tracy, who's not afraid of color, who's actually in the chat right now, this is the Paisley background stamp, and I might even share this technique in today's live. So this is what it looks like, and you can actually take this center piece of the stamp and create this butterfly by stamping it twice, and you use the stamping foam to mirror the image. So it's a great technique to use with the stamping foam, and I might even share that one today. But again, using that brown Weeping Willow to stamp down the sentiment to just make it not so intense, right? So if you want to use these neutrals, especially these two, I love darker colors to kind of stand out on the card, but also sometimes I don't want that intense contrast of the black. So that's where these are going to really come in handy for you guys. All right. Last but not least, I did this card using the Zesty stamp set. So I stamped down all of these lemons and the leaves and stamped them all in different colors. And then I clear heat embossed over top of them. And finally, I used Shady to go over and add tons of contrast. This is a great kind of Joseph's coat technique, and using these neutrals instead of just a black is a great way to do it. So it is kind of this almost black color, and I faded it out into a lighter gray going upwards there, and then added the sentiment that just says, "You're my main squeeze," and that was also stamped down using a little bit of Shady. So it totally does pop. It really does, and it doesn't have to be so dark as a black color. So that's what I love about it. It's just so beautiful. All right, now I think Peggy was asking if she should buy re-inkers with her ink pads. And this is one thing I'm going to say. So re-inkers with these ink pads are important. It's important to grab a re-inker with your ink pad for the sheer fact that if these are a little bit too dry for you, you can re-ink them and add a little bit more color into them. Now, one thing about Ranger's ink pads compared to other brand of ink pads is Ranger does a great job at making sure that the ink pad is filled perfectly for the amount of ink that it's supposed to have. This is something that I want to say here because I know that I get a lot of comments about it sometimes, and I wanted to talk about it here. So, of course, if you like a more juicy ink pad, for sure purchase a re-inker along with your ink pad. I really do recommend that. Not only if your ink pad gets dry to re-ink it, but also if your ink pad comes and you're not satisfied with how much ink is in there, you can always add a little bit more. But one thing I love about Ranger's ink pads are when you're stamping with them, you're not going to get an over coverage of ink. You're going to get the perfect amount on your stamp. Whereas I find sometimes with other brands of ink pads, either the ink is literally bleeding out of the pad because there's so much in there, or you're trying to stamp an image and you can't even get a sentiment stamped because there's too much ink in it. I've seen people have to like wipe their ink pads onto paper towel like 5 different times in order to get all of the ink out to actually start their projects. So that's one thing with these inks. You do need to apply pressure in order to get your ink pad out, and it's not dry, you just need that pressure in order to get it out of that ink pad. So that being said, if you like a super juicy ink pad, purchase the re-inker with it. But also, because this color is lighter, once this color starts drying up a little bit more, it's naturally going to get lighter and lighter. So this is probably the first one I would recommend that you want to buy a re-inker with. And then these two are naturally going to get lighter and lighter, but since there's such dark ink pads already, you're not going to notice as much. Now, you still want to re-ink them because once an ink pad gets dry, it's a little bit harder to save if it gets too dry. But these are going to probably be able to not notice as much as they run out. So that's my little re-inker spiel. I do recommend getting the re-inker just to kind of revive your ink pad and bring it back to life. And really just all up to your personal preference on how you want to re-ink it to perfection, to be honest. All right, now let's get into blending. And to preface this technique, I want to first start off by talking about cardstock because this is one of the most important things when we talk about blending ink pads, truly. So let's talk about my cardstock. This is Simon Hurley Create Stark White cardstock, and there's other cardstocks on the market. Truly, there are other great cardstocks. In fact, this is the cardstock that I used to use before I brought out Simon Hurley Create Stark White cardstock. And everyone at first was like, do you really need your own cardstock? You know, it's just white. It's not going to do much. This is 110-pound white cardstock. I really happen to love it because it takes water nicely. It does some great techniques. If you guys see me using a cardstock in my videos, even when I'm watercoloring, it usually is this stark white because it handles everything really nicely. But also, check that out already. It's just whiter. It's just whiter than another cardstock. And when I was using this one, I thought it was the whitest it could get, right? But this one is just super intense and bright white. But that's really not all. My cardstock is formulated to perfectly take my ink. I tested like 100 different cardstocks to get the perfect one so that it takes ink beautifully. because I was having a couple problems, and whenever anybody asks me why they're not getting the same effects as I am, a lot of times it really does just come down to the cardstock you're using. All right, so let's start off with the other cardstock, because this is where it really is mind-boggling once you see this. And I know anybody who else has seen this maybe has tried my cardstock and now they're in love with it. And this demo kind of really shows, because you can't feel it and try it in person. So I want to kind of share this with you guys. So I'm gonna go on my cardstock and start blending here. This is Prom Queen. I'm gonna just go in here and blend on my surface. Now, that's still a great blend. I'm not saying that it's not a great blend. My inks are formulated to blend super well. Once again, Steve, amazing job. Because my inks blend super smoothly without almost any effort. That's one thing that I love about them so much. But if you see this color on the label there, that's not as dark as that color should be, right? So if I want to go in here, I can try to layer it up a little bit more. It layers a little bit more, but what if I want to get it even darker? It works, but it kind of like rubs off on your finger. If you guys are noticing this, it rubs off on your finger and it doesn't like sink into the cardstock fully, all right? Now, when we blend on the stark white cardstock, you guys are gonna see, it's a crazy world of difference. Already, it starts out just darker. Now, of course, you can fade this out the same way that you did, and make a lighter color, right? But it's taking more of that ink on the first layer there, all right? Then when you go into the second layer, you can really layer up this ink to get so dark and intense, it's crazy. Check that out. And I can keep going, and it's gonna sink into my cardstock. Now, I know there's a lot of people who are like, working on their cardstock and they use like a post-it note to make sure that you're not getting fingerprints. I found that with this cardstock, like I'm not removing any of the ink when I put my finger on here, which is something that was super important to me, right? I didn't want it to come off on your fingers, anything like that. But also, check that out. Check out how much darker of a blend you can get on this cardstock. So of course, with the stark white cardstock, you can keep it this light if you want, if you layer it up once. But the awesome part is if I want to get that intense color, I can. So that's where it's super important, especially when you get into these super intense neutrals. If you want those intense neutrals to be intense, you've got to blend on the correct cardstock. Because what I found is some cardstocks have almost a coating on them. It's not really noticeable if you just touch this cardstock, but once you start blending and really applying things to the surface, you'll notice that some things on some cardstocks sink into the cardstock and some things will sit on top. And that's what I found with this one and lots of other cardstocks on the market. So that's why I was so excited to bring out the stark white cardstock. And then of course, same thing, it'll react with water. So like the other ones, it's going to do that same technique where you can spray it down with water and get that beautiful reaction. It works on both of those. So no matter which cardstock you're using, either one is going to work. This one, actually, because it has a coating, will almost react faster and like lift off more of that color. It's totally different looks. So whatever technique you're doing, you can use either cardstock and it's up to you what you guys want to do. But I wanted to share this first just so that you guys can see it before we move on to this next technique, because this is important to get the darkest color. All right. I hope I'm not rambling too much, but I find that like it's important to go into those specific details to make sure that you guys are going to get the exact same look with your product. So if you're not happy with what you're doing, at least you understand what you can change in order to maybe get that similar effect. Of course, though, I'm not telling you need to buy any certain type of cardstock. I'm just showing you guys what the difference is and why this cardstock is kind of important if you're having that issue. So now let's talk about blending these dark colors, right? Because these colors didn't start out this dark, but I want to share how to get them this way. Look at how intense and beautiful those tones are. It's insane. Check that out. So you get this beautiful ombre of color there, and I'm going to show you guys how to do this. So this is why it was important to talk about that cardstock first, because in order to get this sort of depth on this cardstock and this layering, you do probably need to use kind of an uncoated cardstock similar to stark white. All right, so let's jump into this. Now I'm going to grab out a piece of my stark white cardstock, And I'm going to start blending with a little bit of bee sting. Now, of course, there is some darker colors in my line, but I want to show you guys with a mid-tone first to really show you how versatile some of these new neutral colors are. So, setting off to the side, the lid there, and let's get to blending here. So we're using one of the domed foam blending tools, and I'm just going to start at the bottom here and work my way upward. And again, kind of lightening up my pressure as I get to the top, and you're going to get a much lighter blend. Check out how simple that was. And like I said, zero effort. Literally no effort. It's insane. I'm telling you guys. So we're going to go upward here and just keep working in our ink and get that first layer of ink onto our cardstock. All right. So once we've got that all filled in super quickly, then it's time to kind of build up this color. And so with the bee sting color, you guys saw in that last cardstock example, we can build up this color a little bit. So we can get it a little bit darker at the bottom there. These are translucent dye-based inks. So on this white cardstock, as you add more and more, it's going to layer up and get darker and darker. But at a certain point, the ink is going to just stop. It's just going to stop. You've got a certain amount of color variation with these ink pads, and so that's about as far as you're going to get with this, right? You've got that super deep, intense color on the top, which you can do with that dark white cardstock, and then it goes to really, really light color, which is just beautiful. I love it. So now let's talk about getting this rich intensity like I showed. How in the world did I do that, right? Well, the answer is I did it using a little bit of Shady. I love Shady for this simple fact that it's just such a versatile neutral to add to any blend, right? Because what you can do is darken up the edges. You can add this color in to make any other color darker. So if you guys were in art class, you took a little bit of color theory, you'd know that to lighten up a color, you add a little bit of white. So you could always go in here with a little bit of white pigment ink and kind of lighten it up a little bit. Of course, pigment ink is going to introduce kind of a new formula, but if you wanted to make one side even lighter or give it kind of this hazy, dreamy effect, you could totally do that. But the really awesome part about this is with Shady, you're able to go in then and bring this in from one edge and darken the color, right? And because it's not a black color, it's not going to like really, like cover up this color, which is one thing I love about it. I love that this is just a dark gray. It's not so intense that it's going to overpower everything else, right? But it's going to go in here and act similar to how black would when you're mixing colors and create me a darker shade here at the bottom. So I'm just going in and lightly blending that color in, and again, just blending outward. And even with a black kind of super dark color like this neutral, you're still getting an even blend. Is that not crazy or what? All right. And then right now it looks like we threw a little bit of black over top, right? It's not super blended in. And especially with my camera is, I think, kind of freaking out on these super bright colors from the bright to the dark color. But what you can do is go back in with a little bit of bee sting. And I like to go back in and back over top with this color. It's going to add back in a little bit of red over top. And like I said, these are translucent dye-based inks. And something about this formula, I don't know what it is. Maybe Steve can tell me. It like layers back up and almost not replaces the color, but kind of blends it back in. So this is a good tip for if you're struggling with blending the color and if you want another color to kind of have a different tone to it. So if I wanted to give Shady more of a red tone to it, which is what I want, I'm going to bring back in bee sting right over top of it. And this is going to give you that beautiful effect that we got here. And now this still looks a little bit blacker than the example does, but when these colors kind of dry and they fade into each other a little bit more and they sink into the cardstock, it will lighten up a little bit. So when you first add Shady down onto the surface, you'll be like, whoa, that's literally a black. That's what I did the first time that I sampled this ink. I was like, he made just a black, right? But then once it sinks in, it slowly starts turning into that gray. So that's what you're going to kind of notice with this. It's a little bit lighter in the example here, but so cool. So check that out. And I did the same thing with the blue. Honestly, it almost even blends in a little bit better with that blue, but check that out. It's just beautiful. So again, this blue was literally just, let me do it on the other side. I'm gonna clean this off so that no ink gets in there. Taylor said she loves how moody it makes the bright colors. I agree. It's crazy. So if you love that bright look, that's what's great about my line is there's so many brights to it. But now incorporating these neutrals, it really gives, you know, the lovers of brights an option. But then also if you like that little grunge sometimes, it gives you an option as well. So I think that's super awesome to have those options now. Now I'm going to blend a little bit of color onto the surface here of just no diving. That's what I use in this example. I love no diving. It's this kind of rich and intense mid-tone blue color, and I love the brightness of it. So I'm just going to go in here and blend a little bit of the ink down. All right. And once we've got that blended down, I want to show you guys how to add this in here. So to do that, I'm going to bring in a little bit of shady. All right, and I'm just going to bring it in on the edge here. And check that out. It's just blending in so beautifully. I love it. And if you guys know me, you know that I love to like go around colorful backgrounds and I love to kind of darken it up on the edges and just draw your eye to the center. And this is going to be a great new way to do that with a little bit darker of a tone. And then going from that back to the blue, bring a little bit of blue back in here and blend it all together. So beautiful. Check that out. And then of course, once again, it's going to kind of fade, soften a little bit and blend. And look at how beautiful that is. I love it. All right, so that is how to kind of blend these out. So I hope you guys liked that little demo. I thought that it was super great and super amazing that you can kind of take that color, that one color, and darken up so many of your tones. Now, of course, this sort of technique is going to work for colors like this. I think a purple would work really well. A green might work well. It just depends on how mid-tone the green is. If it's too light, it's not going to work. Yellow, of course, is not going to work. And I don't think any like light orange color would. But for some colors in the line, this is a great way to darken and deepen them up, which is so beautiful. Just to get that super rich and intense color right at the edge is exactly what I wanted. All right, so check that out. And that's going to be great for like, if you use it with the blue, like a sea color, like an ocean. Just beautiful. So stunning. All right. So next I want to talk a little bit about the stamping foam, right? I want to use the stamping foam once with you guys. So I'm going to use first the circle, and then after we use the circle, we'll move on to creating a background with the frame as well, because I love both of them and I want to share both of them as well. So we're already 45 minutes in. Oh my gosh, I have so much to share in today's release. I hope you guys don't mind that we're going a little bit further than I thought we were going to. All right, so I'm gonna go in here with my stamping foam, and I'm going to add a little bit of mint tape down. Now this one doesn't fit on my smaller block as well. I mean, it fits, but it's not perfect. So I want to just throw it on my bigger block, and this will help me get some nice pressure. I'm gonna go in with a little bit of mint tape and tape this down. Any low tack adhesive would work. If you use like anything super strong, it's gonna rip your stamping foam. So I recommend some low tack adhesive. Painter's tape is sometimes good too. I've had sometimes painter's tape rip too. So I do really recommend something, like if it doesn't rip your cardstock, it's not gonna rip your stamping foam, which is a really great kind of comparison to that. So now I want to bring in a 3D embossing folder. And Spellbinders just recently came out with some 3D embossing folders. I know Altenew has some as well. There's lots of amazing brands that carry these 3D embossing folders, which will give you tons and tons of texture. The awesome part about them is because they're so deep of an impression and they've got so many kind of different levels to them, that's where this technique really comes in handy. So I wanted to share with a 3D embossing folder. You could use other textures as well. I've been sharing lots of these sort of techniques on my Instagram. If you guys go check out my Instagram reels, I've been posting new techniques pretty much every day. So if you want more inspiration daily, check that out. It's just at INKLIPSE, INKLIPSE, or Simon Hurley. And you guys can find me over there. But the really awesome part is that this is going to get super deep into here. So let me show you guys why that's important. So kind of eyeball exactly where you guys want the image to be. And I'm thinking that I want this kind of floral arrangement right about there. All right, so let me go in. I'm going to bring my heat tool in. I like to use the Ranger heated tool. This is not a blow dryer. I know some people think that it is. I've gotten some comments about that. You do need a heat tool for the stamping foam. This one gets nice and hot, and what I love about it though is it's super quiet. So like it's nice to kind of craft and talk over, and also it really evenly heats the top surface of it. So it's not too focused in one area, which is super helpful. All right, so just heating this up for about 10 to 15 seconds. You want to keep that heat tool moving to make sure that nothing is going to burn on here as well. All right, and then eyeball exactly where you want it. I kind of planned that out beforehand, and then give it some good pressure there. All right. Oh, check that out. And yes, everybody's in the comments is like, yeah, Taylor just said the foam and 3D embossing folders is magic. So try any 3D embossing folders you guys have at home. Like I said, lots of amazing companies make them. This one's super cool. I love just that floral image there. I'm obsessed with these flower 3D embossing folders. They're gorgeous. But now let me show you kind of the rest of this sort of technique. So I want to color in these flowers. And so there's a couple different ways to do it. One way is going in here. I'm going to grab some colors I want to use. So let's grab some of these. I honestly, no clue what flower this is. So I am just going to color it however I want. So I'm going to go in and bring in some colors. All right, so for this, I'm going to start off with the lightest color, a little bit of shooting star. And with your ink pad, you're going to want to press it into that texture. Normally with stamping foam, I'm like, let's go over the top. Like, let's swipe it a little bit in top. But here you want to literally take the corner of your ink pad and press it so hard into your impression that you're going to get into all of those details. You want no white space showing. All right, that's how we're going to do it here. You might be a little bit confused, but once we get to that last step, you're going to be like, wow, that's insane. Same thing with guppy here. Press it into that detail. We want no white space in there. That's what's so amazing about these 3D embossing folders too, is there's so many different layers to them. So when you get down into that layer, it's really easy and you get a super deep impression, which is beautiful. All right. And then we'll go into prom cream and bring that right at the bottom there. All right, same thing over here. Bring in the corner of that ink pad to the bottom of the image and finish that off. All right. Now, to blend this together, I'm just going to go in with a blending tool and just kind of dab in between those colors to make sure we got it super nicely blended. Then we're going to want to, I'm going to wipe off this area because I want to add a little bit of green for the leaves. All right. So I'm going to go in here. And with this, I want to use a little bit of Psych, which is the super kind of light green color. Press it into the stems. We're letting no white there. And then a little bit of light green up here as well. And press that right in. And then last but not least, we'll bring in a little bit of Viper, which is a little bit of a darker green. I don't want to overwhelm it with this, but I just want to add a little bit here and there. Perfect. Check that out. That's going to be beautiful already. Like, if you stamp that and you add a little bit more ink up here, gorgeous. So stunning. I can already tell that it's going to be such a great image, and I just love the color combination, to be honest. But what if we wanted to add a little bit more contrast. What if we wanted to make this a little bit more, I don't know, like give it some depth and dimension, right? Give it kind of a really beautiful look. That's where shady comes into hand. All right, so we're gonna go in with shady. And like I said, this is where, what was I saying? This is where 3D embossing folders come in handy because that impression is so deep, right? So if you can get a deep impression with any other image, it's great because you can go in here then. We're gonna start at the top here because we've got a lot of surface area to fill in at the top, and we want to just lightly rub over with our ink pad. Now, you're gonna go super light pressure here. You're trying to not get any ink in between the surface area. All right, you're trying to not get any ink into that area where it stepped down a little bit. Now, if you get a little bit, it's not a huge issue. You're probably going to prone to get a little tiny bit of ink down there, but I just try not to, all right? I just try to get as much as I can on the surface and not down into that stamped area. All right, and it looks like we did a pretty good job. And it looks like this embossing folder works really well with that. If you've got an embossing folder that's too far apart with the design, it's gonna go down into there. So try to not do that as much. All right, check that out. Oh my gosh. All right. So with this, I like to always just spray it down. I'm gonna give it a good mist. This is just gonna help the ink transfer a little bit. With this, you want to give the lightest mist possible so that it's glistening, but so that it's not like moving all around, right? So once we've done that, we can go in here, bring this in, and then stamp it down. And y'all, this was the first time using this, and I'm going to stand up because here's why. This is why I'm gonna stand up just so that I can press this so hard because you want all of that texture from the embossing folder that was like down into there. You want that all to stamp. All right, so this is where that acrylic block comes in handy. Press, just really press. All right, and once you've done that, check that out. And if you press even more than I did there, you get even more color. Now, I happen to like that there's actually a little bit of white still in there, right? But that color is still apparent, right? So in some of those areas, that color is still apparent and showing. If you want to, one thing you can do with this technique is go in here. You know what? You can even add more water to help that transfer because there still is some color in there. And then you can go back in and I can kind of see where things line up. And you can just go right back in and press down. There we go. There's more color on there now. That's the beauty of stamping foam is you can kind of eyeball it and line it back up with the edges. And look at that. Check that out. You get the beautiful color underneath with the embossing. And then you get the shady on top, which is just beautiful. And if you want, go in with a little bit of Weeping Willow on top. Like try it out with some of these super rich, intense colors. It gives you such a beautiful effect. I've showed it with also, like you could do this technique with sort of a rosy cheeks and game over combination where it's the same color, but you know, super darker of an intense color. But I tried it like this and I just thought it was amazing. Like so cool that you can go in and get such a beautiful impression with tons of color in the background. And then again, stepping it up with shady and bringing it to a whole new level with contrast. That's one of the amazing things about these neutrals is like what we're really bringing when we bring these colors is a bunch of new contrast to it, which creates some beautiful projects. But like I've showed, there's a bunch of ways to really incorporate these colors and still use a bunch of bright colors with it. So I don't want you guys to get the idea that it's like, all right, we're bringing out these neutrals, you gotta add a bunch of grunge to your project because really these are all still bright and cheery. They've just got that super added contrast to them because of these rich tones. Yeah. Fall cards with this technique, totally. Could you imagine like leaves and then you add color and then you add brown on top? So beautiful. Now, one thing I do want to say is, I'm going to answer this question because I know it's going to happen. you saw me add a lot of ink down beforehand, and then you saw me add this right on top, right? So there's color on there that might be transferring into your shady ink pad. Now, whenever you're blending down color with other colors and you're worried about it kind of blending or mixing, don't worry too much. It doesn't affect your ink pad. Unless if you've got a really bright yellow color, it might stain your ink pad if it's yellow, but like nothing's gonna happen to it. One thing you can do though is just wipe it out on the surface here. And there you can see like there was still a little bit of yellow inside that pad. Is it gonna ruin its life? Absolutely not. But if you wipe it out like this until it goes back to normal, you're gonna have your original color right away. So that's how you make sure that your ink pad doesn't have any of the other colors on it when you're doing kind of a blending technique like this. But the only way you can really ruin an ink pad is re-inking with the wrong color. Otherwise, it's just kind of on the surface, and next time you use it, it'll come out. So that's the that's how you do that. That's how you make sure that your ink pads aren't going to be contaminated or have any other colors sort of inside next time you want to use them. I love this. So cool. All right, guys. So let's move on to the next technique. Should I do another one? We're at about an hour. Are you guys enjoying this? I think we'll go in for one more thing, and then we'll go, and then we'll head out. All right, this one is so much fun. So I'm gonna use the border of this stamping foam. So I love this one. I'm gonna grab it, and I'm going to tape it down to my large acrylic block. Now this is why I got two, because if I got one being in use, I'll grab my other one and use this. So let's grab some tape. And once again, I just tape down kind of the four edges and use some non-stick, or not, I always call this non-stick. I was filming a class recently and I was like, every time I pulled this out, I was like, yeah, let's use some non-stick tape. But if it was non-stick, it just wouldn't be tape. It's low tack. So we're gonna pull out some low tack mint tape, and I just tape the four corners. And again, just make sure it's low tack so it doesn't rip your stamping foam. All right, then we'll take this block, line it up, and press it down. Mel said she's been terrible to her ink pads and they still work perfectly for her. Mel, same. I'm so mean to mine. And even though I mix them with all these different colors, I think a lot of people get really worried, but it really doesn't do anything unless you, like, once you wipe them off, it doesn't do anything to your ink pads. So for this next one, I'm going to stamp it down onto some placemat. Now I've cut this placemat down. I actually use it for a class, but this is such a cool texture and dimension to get because you've got kind of this like cool woven texture, and then also all of the little, like, I don't even know what it is. There's a ton of texture in here. It's almost like wire. So I'm gonna jump into here with my heat tool and heat set this up. And I'm gonna be honest here, when I'm stamping something that's large, like this size of stamping foam, I stand up, all right? That's just personal preference. I find that I can get lots of more pressure and a better impression if I stand up when using this large stamping foam. It's simply because there's a large surface area on it, so it's a little bit more difficult than the others to stamp. It's not super bad, but I noticed a couple of you guys were saying that you were having a harder time getting an impression on this. It's just because it's a little bit larger of a surface area, but the acrylic block should really help you when it comes for that. All right, so heat that up. Then we'll stamp it down and give some good pressure. I tend to rock it back and forth too. I find that helps me for some reason, just to get coverage on every area. Check that out. We got a great impression the first time. I love it. So like I said, that acrylic block helps. And this is what I tend to do. I tend to just like grip onto both of these edges like this when I'm pressing it. And I go 1, 2, and then I move to this side and I go 3, 4. And really quick, and that will give you a great impression all over the place. It's just how I kind of use this acrylic block, how I've learned to do it, and make sure that you can get a really great impression. Some people are asking about mini ink pads. We don't have plans right now to do that, but definitely sometime in the future, but not probably anytime soon. just depends. I love working with the larger size, so that's kind of my go-to. I think the minis are great for travel, so at some point they'll come out. All right, so let me grab a card base. I actually want a folded card base for this because I'm going to stamp directly onto it. All right, so this is just a card that I've cut down with my stark white cardstock and folded in half to get a tap folding card. All right, so I'm going to ink this up using a little bit of cookie dough to start out with. And this is where I have purchased, or not purchased, sorry, this is where I've used these kind of inks a lot. I love this combination together to give a great neutral look to it. All right, so I'm going to ink this up. And here I'm not pressing in like I did the last one. I'm just kind of giving some pressure to make sure that the ink is going in there. And whenever I stamp with the stamping foam, I like to go in this circular impression like this. It gives me a really great inked impression, and it's going to transfer that ink really beautifully without getting any harsh marks. I know that whenever you're stamping anything else, I always recommend to give this kind of pouncing impression, but whenever it comes to stamping foam, swirling like this and keeping your ink pad on the surface is going to give you the best impression. All right. And then I'm going to go in with a little bit of Weeping Willow and go on the edges. And like I always say, I'm obsessed with like inking the edges because I love that kind of darker color that it gives. And also it draws your eye beautifully to the center of your card. So it's a really great way to add lots of depth and draw your eye to the center. Oh, check that out. And I'm telling y'all, this is an intense color, so like a little bit goes a long way when it comes to Weeping Willow. All right. Now, with this, I'm going to go in with my blending tool and blend this out. It needs it. All right, sometimes with these inks, I just go in, if there's any harsh marks or anything like that, I go in with the blending tool and I just kind of soften that edge. It just helps to make sure that the color is not too intense and make sure that the colors are going to have a beautiful blend before they're transferred onto the cardstock. Something super simple to do. It's easier than blending on cardstock or anything like that. It's just softening up these colors. All right. So, once we're done with that, check it out. I love how it's looking. All right, there's one more little kind of line here from where I applied it. Just want to soften that out. It's looking good. All right, we're ready to stamp now. So, gonna take it up here and spray it down. Again, I like to spray it to make sure that it's just gonna transfer nicely. And then we'll take our card base. You gotta make sure it's opening the right way because I've done that too many times. And then when it comes to any of these shaped stamping foams, you're going to line it up at the bottom. I just line it up there. Now there's a little bit of a bleed with these stamping foams, which is great. It's what I really wanted because then you don't have to line it up perfectly. I think you get 1/4 inch on either side, so you get 1/8 inch on all sides, which gives you just that little tiny bit of wiggle room that's like, you don't have to make sure it's perfect, which is amazing. All right, check that out. I love it. There is just so much detail and texture in there. And like I said, that little bit of like, once again, I have zero idea what it is, like wire or whatever that woven stuff is, you can literally see the little lines from it. I don't know if my camera's gonna like focus and pick that up. Do you guys see that? It's insanity. It looks like a basket weave. How cool is that? I love it. So going to spray my surface now to just clean it off after that. All right. And then we can work on the rest of our card. So with the rest of our card, I'm going to do a fun technique that my friend Tracy, or T, showed. So this technique is so much fun. I love doing it. So what I'm going to do is just go in here and stamp this down. Now, when I'm stamping this, I like to use the Paisley background stamp. It's one of my favorites for this, and T showed how to use this Paisley background stamp to kind of create a butterfly. Because look at that. It almost forms a butterfly right in the center there, which is beautiful. So, to do this, I'm going to stamp down onto my Simon Hurley Create Stark White cardstock, and I use a pigment ink. Any pigment ink will work. I find that the Versafine ink works best for this technique. It just is because it's gonna stay wet for a lot longer than any other ink would, and also it's not permanent. I don't want a permanent ink because if it's permanent, it's going to stain things, and I know you guys don't like that. You get a lot of complaints whenever your stamping foam is stained, so this is the ink that I use for it. So, I'm gonna go in here and ink this out, and I just want to ink up the center. I don't need to waste your time by doing the rest of the background because I just want to create a butterfly out of this. All right, so I'm going in here, I'm gonna stamp this down, and then I'll go in and add some pressure down with the Debbie stamping tool. I just use this little pressure tool. I find that it works on the back of my stamps. I honestly don't even use it as much for the Misty, but this is my favorite way to use it. And then when you lift it off, there we have our image. And then I'm gonna go in here and heat emboss this with a layer of clear Ranger heat embossing powder. All right. So throw over a layer of heat embossing powder. Then I'll set this up to the side before we heat set it because I'm gonna do one more thing. And this is what it is. And this is where your guys' questions, I actually see you in the chat right now. Y'all are really smart. Lots of you guys are asking if you can reuse the stamping foam. Sometimes I forget to show things. And yes, you totally can reuse the stamping foam. And in fact, I want to reuse it right now. So I'm gonna change out the image on it. So with my inks, it's something that I really love because even though we use that super dark shady gray color on here, with my ink pads, the best part is that they don't stain. They don't stain your stamps, they don't stain your stamping foam. It really is a game changer because whenever I'm cleaning off my stamping foam or cleaning off a stamp and I want it to be perfectly clean, all I have to do is wipe it off with a little cloth and water and it cleans off perfectly. All right, so now I want to make this flat again. I'm gonna go in here with my heat tool and heat set this for about 10 to 15 more seconds. And this is where the stamping foam really is magic, right? Because you can now reuse this over and over. You can already see that image is starting to disappear in here, which is amazing. Check that out. How cool is that? And so now we're back to normal, we're back to a flat stamping foam, and we can use this for other techniques, other textures, which is so amazing. And yes, if you love the image, Janine just in the chat said she loves stamping foam and she bought so many different packs of it because, and same Janine, I do the same thing, because you can literally leave any image you want inside the stamping foam. And it doesn't go away until you reheat it again. So if you want to keep stamps, this one was made using the holiday florals, and this one was made using a chair that I have at my house. Like literally you can use anything. It's super cool because if you don't reheat it, you can use it as a stamp. All right. Okay, so then here's how this technique is going to really get stepped up. Okay, so I'm gonna go in with my Versafine Clear Ink. Again, same, using that same black ink pad, mainly because it stays wet the longest. This is where it really comes in handy that it stays wet a little bit longer, because I'm gonna go in here, ink this up. And then I'm going to stamp it onto my stamping foam. Give it a little bit of pressure. You don't want to give too much pressure because I don't want to make the image like lose any detail. There we go. We got it on there. Keep the image nice and wet by kind of breathing on it like that. And then I'm going to just place this onto my cardstock and stamp it down. All right, give it some good pressure so that it transfers. And there we have our image. All right, and if that's not dark enough for you, you can always try again. It's not gonna look exactly like the perfect stamping like the other image, mainly because, well, you used your stamping foam for it, but what it is going to give you is it's going to give you a reversed image. And now this is also where the clear heat embossing comes in handy, because I find that whenever I am like stamping like this and I get a lighter image, the clear heat embossing is going to kind of mask that and also make the stamping actually appear darker than it really is. Okay, so now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to heat set this up. I'm going to use a heat tool here. I like this embossing heat tool. It just kind of has a more concentrated heat, so it heats it up a little bit faster. And we're going to heat emboss these. I'm going to mute myself for 1 second while I do this. All right, so we got these both heated up. Sandra in the chat said that I have a clear heat embossing powder addiction. I would agree with that. I use it on pretty much every stamping. Now you can see that one is a lot darker than the other. It's just because it was used on the stamping foam, so of course it's not going to transfer as dark of an image. But once again, I find that the heat embossing powder really kind of melts and it almost intensifies the color a little bit. So even that lighter gray color is going to create a nice look for us. Now sometimes I find that it stamps a little bit darker if you give it a little more pressure as well, and if the ink pad might be a little bit wetter. Mine is a little bit dry right now, so that's probably why as well. But then again, with this ink, it's pretty easy to clean off. All you need to do is just put some water on it, or you could use a little bit of stamp cleaner, and then just a little bit of rubbing will get that pigment ink right off. I find that this one doesn't stain like other inks would, so I really like that factor when you're using it with the stamping foam, just so you don't have that image like impressed on there. But if it does stain anything, it's not too big of a deal. All right, so with the example, I used some cool tones. Here I'm going to use some warm tones just to kind of make it a little bit different. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of Shooting Star, one of my faves. Ink this up. All right. And then I'm going to go on the same thing on this side. And again, here I'm using my Stark White cardstock to make sure that I can get just a beautiful layering of colors. And then next I'm going to go in with a little bit of Guppy, which is going to give me this kind of warm honey tone on there. Look how easy that is to blend. And then after Guppy, I'm going to bring in a little bit of Prom Queen. Love this color. And then after Prom Queen, I'm going to bring in some Game Over. Right at the edge, just to really darken that out. Check out that color blend. I love it. All right. So I did it kind of messy because we don't need it to be perfect. I'm going to now cut this out and you guys will see. So what we're going to do is I just go around here, and which part do I use? I use this. Okay, I got to make sure that I don't cut anything off that I don't want. And all I'm going to do is go in and fussy cut this out, and I leave a little bit of a border. You guys can totally skip that step if you don't want it. But the little bit of a border kind of helps to cut it out and not have to get into all of the tiny little details. There's not too many intricate areas on this stamp though, so it should be pretty easy either way. And all I'm going to do is just cut around this image and leave off any sections that I don't want. So I cut this area of the stamp right off because I just want 2 of those little paisley areas for the wings of the stamp. Yes, Marcy said that you can also press the foam into dies to get all sort of impressions. You can totally press it into, honestly, any texture, and it's going to give you some amazing effects. The one thing I love about pressing it into dies as well is it gives you kind of a more thin line image than any of the other impressions would. It gives you like a super fine detailed line, which is just gorgeous. All right, so finishing this off. And I'm fussy cutting out just using the Fiskars Spring Assist scissors. As you guys know, these are my favorites because the thing about them is they spring back out at you so your hands won't get tired. And also, they've got a nice fine point. So this is what I was talking about. This is why you want to use the stamping foam, because it's giving you literally the exact opposite image. All right, now which one? It's this. I almost cut off this one, and that's the one I need. All right, so just gonna go around here and fussy cut this guy out too. And I think you guys are gonna love this when it all comes together. So if you have this Paisley stamp in your collection, you definitely should try this technique. Once again, it was done by Tracy, who's not afraid of color, here on YouTube. So if you want to check out her channel too, she is super creative and always comes up with super inspiring techniques. And this one especially was just so cool. I love kind of seeing all of your different ways to use these different products. It's like so inspiring to me to be able to share them with you, but then also once I get off this live stream and you guys start getting these products into your hands, it really is so cool to see when you guys use them. So if you do share any of the projects using these products, be sure to tag me on social media at INKLIPSE or at Simon Hurley. And be sure to tag Ranger as well. And that really is the way that we get to see your projects, and we always get so inspired by seeing your amazing makes. So definitely be sure to share those. All right, so once that's all done, you could cut out like a center for the butterfly as well, but I'm not going to do that on camera here. But check this out. I'm so excited about this. So I'm going to place this guy down. Now I'm going to overlap it just a little bit like that. So this, I'm going to adhere down first, just using a little bit of tape runner. And I only add it to like the inside edges. I leave just these little pieces on the edge, kind of not stuck down so that they can look like they're flying. And I'm going to place this guy down. Check that out. And then we'll go in here with our tape runner and overlap this and place him down right next to it. Check out how cool that is, and then bend this upward a little bit, make it look like the little butterfly is flying. I love how that looks. Check it out. So cool that we were able to take the Paisley stamp and totally reuse it to create this beautiful butterfly on here. And I'll link to Tracy after the live stream under the description so you guys can check her out as well. But check that out. I love it. And that is literally just using the Paisleys. So unique and so cool of an idea. And then once again, I'm going to go in and use a sentiment. I love this sentiment set. It is from Lovely Lantanas, and you guys can tell that I love it because it's so used. So I'm going to go in here, and I'll use the sentiment that just says sending love. I love that. That's a good one. You guys can tell I use this sentiment a lot, or this set a lot. And the sentiments in here are some of my faves. All right, so sending love is a great sentiment. I'm going to stamp it down using one of my sentiment acrylic blocks. And then I'm going to stamp it down using a little bit of my brown ink. I'm going to reuse one of these pieces of cardstock. And I'm going to go in with a little bit of Weeping Willow because we use brown all over here. It's a great way to incorporate brown and that neutral on the card. So if you guys didn't know, with my ink pads as well, when you stamp them down, you've got a little tiny bit of playtime here. to throw over a layer of clear embossing powder. And when I say a tiny bit, I mean a tiny bit. They don't stay wet for too long. That's how you don't get fingerprints. But they do stay wet long enough just to like throw over a layer of clear embossing powder. And I'm telling you guys, there was literally no reason to put on that clear embossing powder besides the fact that I just love it. I just like the shine. All right. So then with this, I like to just go in here and fussy cut this out as well. You could totally leave it on a little rectangle like this, but especially when it comes to like sentiments that have got some kind of scriptiness to them, I like to just go in here. I leave such a big white border on sentiments, but I just find that it gives it more of a kind of finished look to the card. It really finishes everything off nicely, even though it's super quick and easy to do. But it just adds kind of a nice look to it, a nice finished effect. All right. Once that's all complete, all we need to do is add that right down onto our card. Where should I place that? No, let me just do it right front and center. I love that. And like having that circle really does give you, like, and the frame around it really gives you a good place to put the sentiment. You can kind of just center it right underneath, and it gives this really kind of nice framed look to it. All right, and that is the card we created today. So this was made using the stamping foam. And yes, I used the stamping foam to get a reverse wing on the stamp. So use your stamping foam, any shape will do as long as it's large enough and you can reverse the image. So I wanted to thank you guys so much for joining along in today's live stream as we created a bunch of cards, as I shared the neutrals in today's live. There was so many things that we were able to cover, which was a ton of fun. And I hope you guys enjoyed seeing everything that we had in store for you, whether it was the neutral ink pads, the new acrylic block, or the stamping foam. There was a lot to look at and a lot to share here during today's live.